236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Well, what a Prime Minister's questions it's going to be today. In a moment, we'll be going live to the Commons where Boris Johnson is going to face the music. And we'll be going through the post-match analysis with my fantastic panel, 2 MPs, one from Labour and one from the Conservatives. Let me know what you think of the Prime Minister's chances of survival, or even what you were doing on the 20th of May 2 years ago when the Downing Street Party was in full swing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. The Prime Minister has so far avoided saying whether he was at the Downing Street Bring Your Own Booze bash with up to 40 people at the height of that first lockdown in May 2020. Can that position hold? Well, to discuss that and much more, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Brendan Clark-Smith, the Conservative MP for Bassett Law, and Mike Amesbury, Labour MP for the Weaver Valley. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Brendan, I'm going to start with you. The number of Conservative MPs who have made their anger at the Prime Minister public is now in double figures. Are you going to join them today and add to those numbers?
Well, I want to wait and see what the Prime Minister's got to say, but I also I think we owe it to people at least to let the full facts come out before we jump to any conclusions. But we've been here before, of course. I've sat on this very chair looking at things previously about parties, what constitutes a party, have people been invited to things, and it's almost this drip of stories. So, again, it's going to be a very interesting Prime Minister's questions, but I think we at least owe it to listen to an explanation first.
Are you surprised that the Prime Minister hasn't told us where he was on May the 20th and whether or not he was at that party?
I think that's probably what he's going to do today, but I think there's that grey area, as we said before. We saw that the Prime Minister's working in the garden. Of course, it's a residence as well as a workplace as well. So I'm sure he's probably going to explain with that today, but I suppose we'll see when Prime Minister's question starts.
Mike, the story probably will move on. We're not going to talk about Downing Street parties forever and a day. Now, your party has a poll lead at the moment, but it's hard to conclude that that's because the government are having their very difficult time rather than any love for the Labour Party.
Well, of course, it's a very serious matter that the Prime Minister, we look at the leaked email, there's clearly an invite. Bring your booze. I mean, how he gets out of this one, and the honourable thing is to fess up, to be honest, and apologise. But of course, it's a serious matter because he's a rule maker, a lawmaker, and if this is the case, he's broke the law. And I'm sure that I know that a number of Brendan's colleagues, they will be writing letters as we speak. And I think that's the way to do this, isn't it? If he broke the law, which I think we'll find that he did attend the party. The evidence is crystal clear. Yes, do the honourable thing, fess up, apologise, but then face the consequences. Yes.
Brendan, it's a fair point from Mike. Can you continue to be Prime Minister if it turns out you did break the law?
Well, I think this is a number of different factors here, Gloria. First of all, was the Prime Minister there? Secondly, was it an actual party? We have seen the email. I was very disappointed when I saw that email. I didn't think it was a particularly sensible thing to send out to people considering the time. So regardless of what we find out today, I think that was very, very wrong. And I think, certainly if I'd have sent that email out, the first thing I would be doing is apologising for it. So that's the thing that I think...
Do you want to see an apology today?
Well, I think certainly with the emails there's an apology due there. In terms of the Prime Minister, whether he'd even been invited to that or whether he was just around there, again, we don't know. So we'll wait and see what he has to say first.
And Mike, this is a possible defence that people were working in Downing Street anyway. It was a workplace. They were key workers. You could argue that garden is an extension of the office, and obviously it wasn't going to add to the spread of the disease because they were all working together anyway. Does that hold any sway with you, Mike?
Absolutely none whatsoever. I think it was 45 minutes before that part. Of course, it wasn't only an email and an invite, it actually happened.
Indeed. Indeed.
So, and I know there's going to be an investigation, but come on, it's nonsense. It happened. Undoubtedly. And broke the law. And there were other people, my constituent, for example, Paul, that emailed me. On that particular day, they buried his mum. Yes? I mean, very tragic circumstance. Only 10 people were allowed at that funeral. 10 people. Stuck by the rules. His question he wanted to put to the Prime Minister, want me to put to the Prime Minister, which I've written to Boris Johnson about this, is... Actually, if he stuck to the rules, he stuck to the law, then why didn't the Prime Minister? And really should be doing the honourable thing, and he should go. And of course, it's in the gift of the Conservative MPs to ensure that happens in terms of writing the letters, which I know many are doing as we speak.
Really, are they? Because I'm reckoning that Brendan has a better... Oh, we are going to the Prime Minister. He's on his feet. Let's go live.
Paying tribute to Jack Dromey. His working life was devoted to his trade union members and, in recent years, his constituents in Birmingham and Erdington. I was deeply saddened to hear of his death, and my thoughts are with Harriet and the family and all those who knew him as a friend. Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want, or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself, the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules. And though I cannot anticipate the conclusions of the current inquiry, I have learned enough to know that there were things we simply did not get right. And I must take responsibility. Number 10 is a big department with the garden as an extension of the office, which has been in constant use because of the role of fresh air in stopping the virus. And when I went into that garden just after 6 on the 20th of May 2020 to thank groups of staff before going back into my office 25 minutes later to continue working, I believed implicitly that this was a work event. But, Mr. Speaker, with hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside. I should have found some other way to thank them. And I should have recognised that even if it could be said technically to fall within the guidance, there would be millions and millions of people who simply would not see it that way, people who suffered terribly, people who were forbidden from meeting loved ones at all, inside or outside. And to them and to this House, I offer my heartfelt apologies. And all I ask is that Sue Gray be allowed to complete her inquiry into that day and several others so that the full facts can be established. And I will, of course, come back to this House and make a statement. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. James Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Carol Ridgway faces 8 weeks of stress and worry as she waits for an urgent appointment at the local breast clinic in North Wales. Yet, despite the pandemic, 85% of patients in England wait only 2 weeks for their urgent suspected cancer referrals. What can my right honourable friend do to ensure equality of healthcare across Britain?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I'm sorry about the case that he raises. Of course, health is a devolved matter, but I thank our NHS colleagues across the whole of the UK, and I point out that the Welsh Government will benefit from an additional £3.8 billion of funding this year, plus a further £270 million to support the response to COVID, Mr. Speaker.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I join with the comments about Jack Dromey? We will, I think, be doing tributes in due course in relation to Jack. Well, there we have it. After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public. He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is...
Hancock went.
I think somebody will be going for an early cup of tea as well. Can I just say, the question's been asked. I want to know the answer. Your constituents want to know the answer. I don't need any extra help either. So please, Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the point that he's making about the event that I attended. I want to repeat that I thought it was a work event, and Mr. Speaker, I regret very much that we did not do things differently that evening, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, and I take responsibility and I apologise, Mr. Speaker. But as for his political point, I don't think that he should preempt the outcome of the inquiry, and he will have a further opportunity, Mr. Speaker, I hope, to question me as soon as possible.
Keir Starmer.
Well, that apology was pretty worthless, wasn't it? Let me tell him why this matters. Yesterday, in this chamber, honourable members told heart-wrenching stories about the sacrifices people across the country were making. This House and the whole country were moved by the honourable member for Strangford as he talked about his mother-in-law dying alone. He was following the rules, whilst the Prime Minister was partying in Downing Street. Is the Prime Minister really so contemptuous of the British public that he thinks he can just ride this out?
Mr. Speaker, I heard the testimony of the honourable member opposite, and I echo his sentiments. It was deeply moving. Nobody who heard that could fail to have been moved. And I know that people up and down the country made huge sacrifices throughout this pandemic, Mr. Speaker, and I understand the anger, the rage that they feel at the thought that that people in Downing Street were not following those rules. I regret the way the event I have described was handled. I bitterly regret it and wish that we could have done things differently. And I have and will continue to apologise for what we did. But, Mr. Speaker, he must wait for the inquiry, which will report as soon as possible.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister's former Health Secretary broke the rules, he resigned. Yes. And the Prime Minister said he was right to do so. When the Prime Minister's spokesperson laughed about the rules being broken, she resigned. And the Prime Minister accepted that resignation. Why does the Prime Minister still think that the rules don't apply to him?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not what I've said, and I understand the point that he makes. As I've said, Mr. Speaker, I regret the way things happened on the evening in question, and I apologise. But if I may say to him, I do think it would be better if he waited until the full conclusion of the inquiry, until the full facts are brought before this House, Mr. Speaker, and he will then have an opportunity to put his points again.
This just isn't working, Prime Minister. No. Everyone could see what happened. Exactly. It started with reports of boozy parties in Downing Street during lockdown. The Prime Minister pretended that he had been assured there were no parties. Yeah. How that fits with his defence out, I do not know. Exactly. Then the video landed, blowing the Prime Minister's first defence out of the water. So then he pretended he was sickened and furious about the parties. Now it turns out he was at the parties all along. Can't the Prime Minister see why the British public think he's lying through his teeth?
Prime Minister, it was what the public think, not what a member is saying. Order. And I certainly don't need any help from round here. If somebody wants to help me, they can help somewhere else. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's up to the right honourable gentleman to choose how he conducts himself in this place. He's wrong. He's wrong. I say to him that he is wrong. He is wrong in what he said he said what he is wrong what he said is wrong in several key respects. But, Mr. Speaker, that does not detract from the basic point that I want to make today, which is that I accept that we should have done things differently on that evening. As I've said to the House, I believe that the events in question were within the guidance and were within the rules, and that was certainly the assumption on which I operated. But can I say to him, Mr. Speaker, that he should wait before he jumps to conclusions, Mr. Speaker. A lawyer should respect the inquiry. I hope that he will wait until the facts are established and brought to this House.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, so we've got the Prime Minister attending Downing Street parties, a clear breach of the rules. We've got the Prime Minister putting forward a series of ridiculous denials which he knows are untrue. Yes. A clear breach of the ministerial code. That code says ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. The party's over, Prime Minister. The only question is, will the British public kick him out, will his party kick him out, or will he do the decent thing and resign?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to repeat that I think that the right honourable gentleman, I know that it is his objective, and he's paid to try to remove me from office, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that, and I accept that. But may I humbly suggest to him that he should wait until the inquiry has concluded. He should study it for himself, and I will certainly respond as appropriate, and I hope that he does. But in the meantime, yes, Mr. Speaker, I certainly wish that things had happened differently on the evening of May the 20th, Mr. Speaker, and I apologise for all the misjudgments that have been made, for which I take, Mr. Speaker, full responsibility.
Keir Starmer.
The Prime Minister's a man without shame. The public want answers to their questions. Hannah Brady's father, Sean, was just 55 when he lost his life to COVID. He was a fit and healthy key worker. I spoke to Hannah last night, Prime Minister. Her father died just days before the drinks trolley was being wheeled through Downing Street. And last year, Hannah met the Prime Minister in the Downing Street garden. she looked at the Prime Minister in the eye and told him of her loss. The Prime Minister told Hannah he'd done everything he could to protect her dad. Looking back, what Hannah told me last night was this. She realises that the Prime Minister had parted in that same garden the very day her dad's death certificate was signed. What Hannah wants to know is this. Does the Prime Minister understand why it makes her feel sick to think about the way that he's behaved?
Mr. Speaker, I sympathise deeply with Hannah, with people who have suffered up and down this country during the pandemic, and I repeat that I wish things had been done differently on that evening, Mr. Speaker, and I repeat my apology for all the misjudgments that may have been made, that were made on my watch in Number 10 and across government. But I want to reassure the people of this country, including Hannah and her family, that, Mr. Speaker, we have been working to do everything we can to protect her and her family, and it is thanks to the efforts of this government that we have the most tested population in Europe, with 1.25 million tests being conducted every day. We've been working to ensure that this population, our country, has the most antivirals of any country in Europe. And, Mr. Speaker, it's because of the efforts of the government, of officials, of staff up and down Whitehall, that we've driven the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, one of the fastest in the world. And that is the reason, Mr. Speaker, that we now have one of the most open economies, if not the most open economy in Europe, and one of the fastest growing economy, Mr. Speaker, in the G7. And, Mr. Speaker, whatever the mistakes that have been made on my watch, for which I apologise and which I fully acknowledge, that is the work, Mr. Speaker, that has been going on in Number 10 Downing Street.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education is one of the biggest factors when it comes to levelling up. It's what ensures that people right across the country have access to the same opportunities, and it's a key part of my mission to transform lives in Burnley and Padiham. With that in mind, would the Prime Minister work with me to ensure that Burnley becomes the best place to study, whether you're in primary and secondary school, looking for an apprenticeship in advanced engineering, or undertaking a degree in cybersecurity?
Yes, I thank my honourable friend, and we're investing in education up and down the country, and I'm delighted that Burnley College was part of a successful proposal to become an Institute of Technology, and that Burnley is home to the growing University of Central Lancashire campus, making it a fantastic place to study in Lancashire.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I add my remarks in terms of Jack Dromey, someone who was a festy fighter for workers' rights and an inspiration to so many of us across this House for the way that he conducted himself. We will miss him, and condolences to Harriet and to the rest of the family. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister stands before us accused of betraying the nation's trust, of treating the public with contempt, of breaking the laws set by his own government. A former member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, Paul, wrote to me this morning. His father died without the love and support of his full family around him because they followed the regulations, Prime Minister. Paul said, as an ex-soldier, I know how to follow the rules, but the Prime Minister has never followed any rules. He does what he wants, and he gets away with it every time. The Prime Minister can't get away with it again. Will the Prime Minister finally do the decent thing and resign, or will his Tory MPs be forced to show him the door?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman, but I want to offer my condolences to his constituent who wrote to him, and just to remind him of what I've said earlier. And with the greatest respect to him, I think that he should wait until the inquiry has concluded.
Ian Blackford.
It's an open and shut case. It's an event that should have taken place. It broke the law, Prime Minister. And what's so galling about that response is that the Prime Minister feels no shame for his actions. The public suffered pain and anguish at being kept apart from their families, all the while the Prime Minister was drinking and laughing behind the walls of his private garden. The public overwhelmingly think that the Prime Minister should resign. Trust has been lost, and the public will not forgive or forget. If the Prime Minister has no sense of shame, then the Tory backbenchers must act to remove him. They know the damage is done. This weak and contentious Prime Minister can no longer limp on. The message from the public is clear. Remove this unfit Prime Minister from office and do it now.
Prime Minister.
Well, I just want to thank the right honourable gentleman for his political advice, which I will take with a pinch of salt since it comes from the Scottish Nationalist Party. But I think that most people looking objectively at what this government has delivered over the last 18 months would agree and I renew my contrition for the mistakes that have been made, but we have delivered the fastest vaccine and the fastest booster rollout in Europe, and the result is that across our whole of our United Kingdom, Mr. Speaker, we have a record number of people back in work.
Simon Fell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, I met with the Chief Executive of my local hospital trust, the University Hospitals in Morecambe Bay, to talk about how they were managing COVID and the impact it was having on them. The impact is stark. They've got about 12 to 15% of their workforce away isolating, and 140 beds, that's about 20% of the total, blocked because they can't get people back out into social care and the community. So with that in mind, will my right honourable friend consider reducing the self-isolation period, if it's seen to be safe to do so, down to 5 days, and also accepting any MACA requests which come through to help get people back out into the community and into social care?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, well, we're certainly looking at reducing the isolation period and hope to bring you more, Mr. Speaker, about that as fast as possible. We'll certainly look at all MACA requests, but more fundamentally what we can do to alleviate the pressures in his hospital is to fix the health and social care divide, which is what this government is also doing after a generation of neglect.
Stephen Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's apology is too little, too late. If the Prime Minister was sincere, he could have apologised at any stage over the past 18 months, rather than waiting until he was found out. My constituents in North Down and people across the UK feel betrayed by the Prime Minister. We've had over 150,000 deaths from COVID over the past couple of years. We have seen standards in public life trashed. So for once, can the Prime Minister do the honourable thing and resign for the sake of the public health message and for standards in our democracy?
Mr. Speaker, I can only repeat what I've said, and I understand the feelings he has about the effect of this pandemic on this country, and I certainly grieve for everybody who has died and who has suffered. But on his political point, can I propose that he waits for the inquiry to report?
Susan Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited my local job centre, and I'm absolutely pleased to announce that the adult claimant count is down 28%, and the young adult claimant count is down 40%. Will the Prime Minister join me in thanking all the hard work of the Stourbridge Job Centre for their dedication to actually achieve these results, and also to contribute to the jobs revival that's happening across the West Midlands? 61,000 new jobs since March 2021.
Prime Minister. Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I thank her for that. And it's notable that the opposition don't like to dwell on these points, but it is an astonishing fact that we have 420,000 more people in work now than before the pandemic began, and youth unemployment at a record low, Mr. Speaker.
Stephen Bonner.
Mr. Speaker, another week, another scandal for this Prime Minister and his utterly shameless government. For 2 years, my constituents made sacrifice after sacrifice, spending time away from our loved ones, missing out on important life events. Some paid the ultimate sacrifice, while he partied away. Figures released just last night show that 79% of people in Scotland think the Prime Minister should step down. Does the Prime Minister now realise that it's clear to all that, while he may not understand how to be socially distant from others, there is no doubt that he is morally distant from the rest of us across these nations. And the best thing he can do now is go. Resign, Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the SNP, and I repeat the point that I've made earlier on. I don't think that he should preempt or anticipate the inquiry.
Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Colne Valley Regional Park runs through my constituency and the Prime Minister's. Would my right honourable friend join me in paying tribute to the volunteers who tirelessly work to preserve this precious green space? And will he work with me to create better protections for this park moving forward?
Prime Minister.
I certainly will. I join her in thanking the wonderful volunteers, and I will do what I can to assist her in protecting this beautiful green space.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a different topic to that of my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, but a related one. Last week at Prime Minister's Questions, the Prime Minister was asked about his previous claim about that his previous claims about inflation were unfounded, and in his reply he told the House he had said no such thing. But within minutes the inevitable happened, and people were watching videos on social media saying exactly that. So would the Prime Minister like to take this opportunity to correct the record and apologise for misleading the House on this matter?
That would be inadvertently misleading the House, Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, because I immediately said in my answer to the question that, of course, you had to be concerned about inflation at all times. What I said, I think on TV, was that some of the predictions then about inflation had not proved well-founded. But clearly, inflation is a serious risk. It is going up, and what we need is a strategy to tackle it, and that's what we have.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Grant Bailey, went back to Afghanistan in September. He disappeared in December around Christmas time. We think the Taliban have him. Can my right honourable friend advise me and his family whether he knows anything about this man, who has him, and what is being done to get him home?
Prime Minister. I thank my honourable friend and for raising the case with me, and I hope I will organise a meeting for him with the relevant minister as soon as possible to establish what we can do to help Grant.
Gold Turner.
Yeah. He's not apologised, Mr. Speaker, for breaking the rules and breaking the law. He's sorry because he's been caught. Yeah. He is bang to rights. Yeah. So when my constituents were making unimaginable decisions, he was hosting a boozy party in Downing Street. So how does he think he can still maintain the one rule for him and another for the rest of us? Yeah. He cannot, and he must resign.
Mr. Speaker, I refer to the answer I gave earlier on.
Peter Bone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This Friday, my private member's bill, BBC licence fee abolition, gets its second reading. It will abolish the BBC licence fee and require the BBC to be funded by subscription. In this day and age, it's ridiculous to have a state broadcaster. It's ridiculous that people are forced to pay a fee just because they have a television. And what is totally wrong, that people who believe the BBC to be institutionally biased have to subsidise them. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister, if he's free on Friday, come along and support the bill?
Mr. Speaker, I have the highest respect for for the media judgment of my honourable friend. Though I understand some of his strictures about the BBC, Mr. Speaker, I would also say that it is a great national institution. But I will study what he has to say with interest.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've all had Prime Ministers that we disagreed with or we didn't rate, but there's never been one that debased the office in the way that this. He's now forced to lie down in the back of his car to keep away from photographers. We all know the Prime Minister was sacked from 2 previous jobs for lying. So can he explain to the House why he believes that the great office of Prime Minister can be held to a lower standard than those previous jobs that he was sacked from? Prime Minister.
Well, I welcome the point that the honourable gentleman makes. In the partisan spirit with which I think it was intended, I don't agree with him. But can I suggest to him respectfully that he waits until the inquiry is concluded, which I hope will be as soon as possible.
Alberto Costa.
Washing machine manufacturers are considering installing microfiber filter systems in all new washing machines. Will the Prime Minister ask his ministers? Will the Prime Minister ask his ministers to look at?
We've got a slight problem. Some of you want to catch my eye. The longer this question takes, the less other people will get in. Alberto Costa.
People laughing at plastic pollution, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister ask his ministers to look into the viability of my bill, which has cross-party support and seeks to introduce inexpensive microplastic filters on all new washing machines?
Well, I want to thank my honourable friend for his campaign, and I believe that we should tackle microplastic pollution, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad that DEFRA are looking at the introduction of legislation for microfiber filters on washing machines as a cost-beneficial solution. And I will make sure that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for the Environment, will keep him informed of how we're doing.
Mr. Brenda Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too wish to join colleagues in paying tribute to Jack Dromey. I knew him first in the early 70s and worked with him on the Grunwick strike. He will be greatly missed. Mr. Speaker, thousands of men and women in Afghanistan supported the NATO mission, and they have been abandoned. In 6 months, we don't have a credible route to help people out of Afghanistan safely. The most recent update from the FCDO is directly contradicted by the UN. While the FCDO claims that from spring the UNHCR will make referrals to evacuation schemes, the UNHCR's own website is very clear they make no such referrals. Mr. Speaker, is the government creating a Kafkaesque system to intentionally fail those we owe something to, or is this yet another case of the amateurism and hopelessness that prioritized pen farthings pets over human beings?
Mr. Speaker, I believe he does a serious injustice to the efforts of local councils up and down the country to look after people coming from Afghanistan, and I think he does an injustice to the efforts of the UK. We are proud already under Operation Pitting to have evacuated 15,000 people from Afghanistan, Mr. Speaker, and we've allocated 286 million in aid, in assistance for people in Afghanistan, and we are continuing to offer safe passage to this country from Afghanistan.
Paul Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware that Eastleigh was formed as a railway town, from producing locomotives and carriages to building gliders for the D-Day landings. Eastleigh has a proud railway heritage.
Hear, hear.
Given this pedigree, the excellent transport links and the need to level up the south, does he agree with me that Eastleigh would make the perfect home for the new headquarters of Great British Railways?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a great champion for Eastleigh, and as I told the House earlier, further details of the competition to identify the new Great British Railways headquarters will be announced in the coming weeks.
Devendra Mishra.
Mr. Speaker, in my constituency of Stockport, the average rent for a two-bedroom property is an unaffordable £800. And recently, in the last 13 years, the rents have been significantly increasing. One constituent contacted me recently to explain that she and her husband, who are in their 70s and suffer from ill health, have just been served with a Section 21 notice after living in the property for almost 20 years. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own manifesto promised a better deal for renters, which included abolishing no-fault evictions. So when will he scrap this practice and reintroduce the much-needed Renters Reform Bill, which seems to have been kicked into the long grass?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the first things I did when I became Prime Minister was to uprate local housing allowance so that people on social rent would be able to afford where they live more easily, is a key component of tackling the cost of living, Mr. Speaker. But what we're also doing is building record numbers of homes, Mr. Speaker, and I was very pleased to see a huge increase in the number of people able to get the homes that they need. But the point that he makes about renters is also very, very important. And that's why we're tackling the rights of renters as well.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 56 million through the Levelling Up Fund, 40 million through Transforming Cities. This is just some of the investment we've secured for Stoke-on-Trent recently. Would my right honourable friend agree, after decades of neglect, this Conservative Party is the only party that is levelling up opportunities in Stoke-on-Trent?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. He is a fantastic champion for Stoke-on-Trent, and in addition to all the things that we are supporting in Stoke-on-Trent, I'm delighted to say that Stoke-on-Trent will become the home to the Home Office as well.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think this session shows how much of a distraction the Prime Minister's behaviour has been. I want to ask him that after a recent survey showed 37% of small businesses felt totally unprepared for the introduction of import controls, rules of origin and the upcoming SPS checks. So will he listen to the FSB and introduce financial and technical support to those small businesses, or is he just too busy drinking in his garden?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank her, but what we are doing is offering financial and technical support to businesses, and they are responding magnificently. And as we come out of the pandemic, we are seeing, as I said to the House earlier on, record numbers of people in work and youth unemployment at a record low.
Alicia Cairns.
Speaker, the motto of England's smallest county, Rutland, is multum in parvo, much in little, and never has that been more true than the last 2 weeks. The greatest Roman discovery in 200 years, an ichthyosaur, the greatest fossil discovery in 100 years. So will he please support us to build a new tourism industry and 2 heritage museums in Rutland to preserve these amazing discoveries in our county?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm agog. I'm longing to come and see these extraordinary additions to the cultural heritage of Rutland, and I thank her for drawing it to my attention, and I look forward to making a visit as soon as I can.
Daniel Zeitner.
Mr. Speaker, the government's flagship Green Homes grant scheme collapsed in a £1.5 billion shambles at the end of last year, with just 81 vouchers issued in Cambridge and just 85 in the Prime Minister's constituency. With energy bills about to go through the roof, what is it about this government that makes it so peculiarly unable to run a basic loft-lagging scheme?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are supporting measures to retrofit homes up and down the country, and in addition, in order to improve the insulation, Mr. Speaker. But what we're also doing is supporting people with the costs of their fuel. We will continue to do that through the Warm Homes discount, the winter fuel allowance, and all the other payments that we make.
Crosby.
On Welsh free ports, can the Prime Minister confirm to me and my Ynys Môn constituents that the UK government is committed to at least 1 free port in Wales, and can he give an update to the House as to how discussions are progressing with the Welsh government?
Yes. Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. I can tell her that the my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, is indeed talking to his counterparts in the Welsh Government about establishing a free port in Wales, and I urge our friends in the Welsh Government to agree those plans as a matter of urgency.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government commissioned NatSen to research the use of health and disability benefits, but has yet to publish the findings. Its own protocol for publication states social research must be released in a way that promotes public trust. The cost of living crisis is hitting disabled people hard at a time when many people were already struggling, and it's surely time to start rebuilding their trust. So will the Prime Minister commit today to publishing this research?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will do everything we can to support people throughout the recovery period from the pandemic. We will support disabled people, and we continue to increase our support for families up and down the country. And she requests that we publish the research. We will do so as soon as we can, Mr. Speaker.
Jenkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend for his continued support for new nuclear.
Hear, hear.
Following the passing of our landmark nuclear financing bill this week, will he put his weight behind my efforts and those of my Cumbrian colleagues to bring large and small new nuclear to Cumbria?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and he is quite right that one of the disasters of the Labour administration of the 13 years of Labour was that they allowed a total collapse in our nuclear power, Mr. Speaker. I'm afraid, which is one of the reasons we have a shortage of energy, and that's why we're investing now in small modular reactors as well as the big projects.
Chris Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the Prime Minister didn't spot that he was at a social event. That's the excuse, isn't it? Come off it. I mean, how stupid does the Prime Minister think the British people are? The worst of it is, he's already managed to completely destroy Allegra Stratton's career. He's tarnished the reputation of Lord Geit. And now he's making fools of every single MP who cheered him earlier. Every single one who goes out on the radio and television to defend this shower of shenanigans. Would it not be absolutely despicable if, in the search for a scapegoat, some junior member of staff ends up losing their job, but he kept his?
I'm grateful as ever, Mr. Speaker, to the right honourable gentleman. I think a former member of the Conservative Party, as I understand it. But I'm grateful to him for his party political advice. I don't agree with him, Mr. Speaker. I've come to this House to make amends, to explain what happened on May the 20th and to apologise. But, Mr. Speaker, I really think that, with all humility, I must ask him to wait for the result of the inquiry, where he will have abundant opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to question me again and to make his party political points again. But until then, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ignore his advice.
Jonathan Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds of respondents took part in the Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove and Talk Bus Back Better survey, of which 80% said they would use the bus more if services were improved. The Conservative-led Stoke-on-Trent City Council has submitted a fantastic Bus Back Better bid for £90 million to improve our infrastructure and our services. So will the Prime Minister make our day in Stoke-on-Trent and announce that money is coming soon?
I thank him for his fantastic championing of Stoke-on-Trent. I also thank him, Mr. Speaker, for volunteering to serve as a teacher during the pandemic. A wonderful thing to do, Mr. Speaker, and I will certainly look and see what we can do to satisfy his request for more buses in Stoke as fast as possible.
Final question, Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, can I join in the tributes to Jack Dromey, an outstanding trade unionist and member of this House? Mr. Speaker, after another shameful week for his government, this has been a shameful attempt to apologise to this House today. So can the Prime Minister explain why the only person to resign so far for this scandal is Allegra Stratton, a woman, while he, the man who sanctioned and attended at least one party in 10 Downing Street, still sits in his place. Mr. Speaker, advisers advise and ministers decide. So will the Prime Minister, for the good of the country, accept that the party is over and decide to resign?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank him for his question. You know, and I respect the point that he's making, but I must say I disagree, and I would ask him I would ask him to wait and see what the inquiry says, and I'll be very happy to talk to him then.
I'm going to let people leave before we start the urgent question.
And what a Prime Minister's Question Time that was. With me now to go through how it went to my fantastic panel, Conservative MP for Bassett Law, Brendan Clark-Smith, and Shadow Local Government Minister from Labour, Mike Amesbury. Mike, when we spoke before Prime Minister's Question Time, you said he should fess up.
Yes.
He's done so. He has apologised. He said he understands people's anger. Time to move on?
It was a non-apology. It wasn't even a qualified apology. He referred to it technically falling within the rules. He now needs to do the honourable thing. He does need to resign. If he doesn't resign, I think Keir Starmer was very strong on this. It's very, 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 very clear. Then it's up to members of the Conservative Party to remove him. He's bringing dishonour on the office of Prime Minister.
Brendan, he still is sort of saying it was a work event. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been to work and told to bring a bottle.
Yeah, I mean, I think sitting at your desk with a packet of crisps and a drink, you know, I think a lot of us do that, in not just Westminster, in a lot of workplaces. And I do think saying wait for the inquiry was simply not enough. So I think the apology was really, really important, and I think he got that in early, was very conciliatory about it. And as the Prime Minister said, you know, he takes ultimate responsibility for it. You know, he's the Prime Minister, it's number 10, it is his operation there, and whilst he may not have organised whatever it was, I think it's important he did confirm that he was present as well there, even though it was for a limited amount of time. He maybe didn't know exactly the details of it, and that's what the inquiry will actually bring out. But at the same time, I think the Prime Minister, he has been conciliatory. He has apologised, which I think is really important to take responsibility for that, Gloria.
In the polls this week, 66% of voters think the Prime Minister should stand down. Do you think following his apology today, that number will come down?
I think some people will be satisfied with the apology, certainly. I think the wider issue, I think, about parties and so on and investigations, I do think that's going to need to be revisited. And as I say, if people have broke the rules and the investigation says that, then I would expect heads to roll, obviously, with that. The Prime Minister's given his case there, but I think the public want to see people treated fairly. You know, they stuck to the rules. The vast majority of people did. The Prime Minister claims that he did. We have this grey area. Of course, the Leader of the Opposition has used the workplace defence with having a drink and so on before. You know, I didn't criticise over that because I understand that there is that grey area, but at the same time I think the public really know the difference between what is an actual party as well, and if it is shown that there has been a party, you would expect something to be done about that.
Now, Mike said that the Prime Minister should resign. The only people that can actually force out a Prime Minister are Conservative MPs, a point that Mike made. Now, I sort of don't expect you to be honest about this, but just tell me what the mood is like on your benches.
Generally, I think people are frustrated. Obviously, there's this drip of things coming out. You know, I think whether someone's got sour grapes, I wish they would just put it all into the public forum so we can actually have a proper discussion on this. But, you know, MPs, we believe in our Prime Minister. We want him to achieve things. It's been a very difficult period for all of us, and there's been a lot of successes and so on, but at the same time we want to be a very professionally run outfit, and we want to give the right impression to the public. So I think it's right that we really hold people to account with that, and we do get the answers, but at the same time this idea that suddenly there's some mass rebellion against the Prime Minister case.
I would say sorry then for saying that. I don't expect you to be honest, because I thought you gave quite a frank account, and I am grateful for that. Do either of you either of you have a bet ever? There's a question for this. There's a reason why I'm asking this question, because I want you to. What do you think the odds are of Boris Johnson still being the leader of the Conservative Party come that next election? Might help you if he is there.
I mean, the only time I bet is the Grand National, I will say that. But if I were to bet on this one, I'd say the odds are particularly going against certainly the Prime Minister at the moment. And of course, I'd like to see the reality of this Prime Minister gone. Yes, I would say that, obviously being a Labour MP. But I don't think there's any grey area, Brendan, here. I think, I mean, credit to you for coming on to defend the undefendable, I suppose. But, he not only broke rules, he broke the law, and he's Prime Minister. And it can't be one rule for the Prime Minister and the government and a rule for everybody else. People out there, as certainly questioners today said, they're not stupid. They know the reality of this. Got to do the honourable thing and go. And if he won't do it himself, then it's up to the likes of yourself, Brendan, or your colleagues to get rid for the good of the country.
Are you betting that is going to be a leader come that next election, Brendan?
I do like a bet occasionally. I hope the Prime Minister will be in place. He's been very successful so far. I think I'm 200 to 1 the last I checked. So for those at home that don't know betting, that means if you stick £10 on, that you would lose £10. So I've got faith in
You've looked. Yeah.
This point that Mike made there, and that the Labour Party are going to, I suspect, repeat and repeat and repeat. This is a government and a Prime Minister who thinks they're above the rules, where there is one rule for them and one rule for everyone else. That's quite dangerous.
It is, and you can't have that. And if laws have been broken and rules have been broken, then I'm the first person who will stand up and say that there should be some accountability for that. And people have walked the plank, so to speak, in the past because of that. The Prime Minister has said that obviously he believes he's acted within the rules, and he said let's wait for the inquiry and so on.
Do you think he's acted within the rules?
Based on the information I've seen from what the Prime Minister has told us, yes, I do. I believe what the Prime Minister's saying. I think he's innocent until proven guilty. If the inquiry says something different, then obviously we have that discussion when we come to it. But at the same time, it's about fairness, Gloria, and people just want to see fairness, and they also want to see integrity from us as politicians in public office. So I think if we start from that basis, I think that's the right place to go.
Let's move on to the other big issue in politics. And
this is the washing machine, isn't it?
Yeah. We're not going to talk about Alberto Costa's washing machine and microfibres, although he has been on this show to discuss his campaign. Yes. The cost of living.
Yes.
Mike, your party held a debate and a vote yesterday in Parliament. Your party wants to scrap VAT on energy.
Yes.
That would provide a bit of help in cutting bills, but the Prime Minister's argument is that it's not particularly progressive, because if you cut VAT on energy, then all of us who are quite well off would benefit.
Well, it's more than that. We're talking about a windfall levy as well. So tax, a one-off tax it's a temporary basis. Those with the broadest shoulders are obviously profiting from this at the moment. So the major energy companies and gas companies. Of course, Boris Johnson, he said that one of the benefits of Brexit would be that flexibility around VAT, and he cited fuel bills. And now he seems to be changing his picture. Look, it's a quick way to get money out of the door. Of course, those on a fixed income, which some are pensioners as well, it will help those. So that'd be £200 bringing the bills down. We'd also give an uplift to the winter fuel payment, and that would be £400. So £600, bringing those astronomical fuel bills down. And it's funded. And yet we've yet to see anything from the Conservative government and the Prime Minister at the moment, who are obviously busy making Downing Street Party central.
Brendan, the Prime Minister, who wasn't the Prime Minister then, but he was a leading figure in the Leave campaign, he did promise to cut VAT on energy when he was a leading voice in that Brexit campaign. He promised Sun readers, he wrote a piece in The Sun saying that fuel bills would be cheaper if we left the EU. So do you want them to cut VAT?
In principle, it's fine, but when you actually look at it, Gloria, it's 5% of people's bills. That works out just over a pound a week, really. That's not really going to make the huge difference we need if the wholesale prices are shooting up. We have green levies. They make up a significant proportion of people's bills. Now, we're not saying let's completely scrap all the move away from fossil fuels and net zero and so on. I think you can still do that and bring people's bills down. But it's about investing in things in the past that hasn't happened. So I would point to things like nuclear, which generates a huge amount of power that perhaps we haven't explored that. Now we are, which I think is a good thing. But it's bringing down that wholesale price. And I think giving people £1 a week reduction from VAT isn't really going to cut it. And to think of some of the things that we've mentioned, schemes that are currently there, like the Warm Homes grant, I would rather money went into that than a VAT cut, so we can actually target it. Because, I don't need to save £1 a week. I don't need a VAT cut on my fuel bill. But there are people out there that do actually need help. I would rather target the help at them.
Why is your party going to exacerbate the cost of living crisis by putting up all our taxes in April?
Well, I'm a small state Conservative. I like my low taxes. I like government to get out the way generally. I think it's been very, very difficult with the pandemic. We had the national insurance increase, of course. That was in that manifesto that we weren't going to do that. Then COVID came along. But I think if we get to the situation where people can't visit a doctor, or we have the cost of social care, which is a growing problem, really, and we haven't addressed that, then I think things are going to be far worse. So I think we've had to make some very difficult decisions. Of course, when you spend money, that needs to be found from somewhere, and we're trying to be responsible rather than creating more debt. But if we can grow the economy and we can get out of this difficulty that way, then we can start looking at cutting taxes and cutting the cost of living as well.
Mike, I'm guessing your constituent, did it vote to leave your part of the world?
It was split pretty much down the middle. So it was, yes, well, it's 50-50.
Now, of course, you're in a poll lead at the moment, but it's midterm. Ed Miliband had a poll lead for the entirety of my time in the Shadow Cabinet, and that didn't end well at all. Do you think he needs to apologise over his position on Brexit to win those voters back?
I mean, we're in a post-Brexit world now. We've listened to the electorate. People have moved on, and we've got to ensure that we can actually ensure that Brexit works. Okay. I think it's challenging, but that's what we've got to do. That's what we've got to do. We've listened to the electorate. The electorate spoke, didn't they? So we move on.
It's been great to have you both with us. An all-Northern panel. We're all in favour of that on this show.
East Midlands, Gloria. East Midlands.
You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria DePiero. The show is back every weekday from noon. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. But for now, it's time for your weather.
Hello. A sparkling day of winter sunshine for most parts of the UK. It is a little cloudier over northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. And tonight we will again see frost and fog patches forming. Big chunky area of high pressure has moved in, keeping the weather fronts well to the north. Notice though across Scotland the isobars are a little closer together, so it's quite windy here, and that wind is bringing a lot of cloud to western Scotland, patchy rain over the Highlands and the Northern Isles. Bit of cloud too for northwest England, Northern Ireland, but much of eastern England, the Midlands, Wales and the south, dry, fine and sunny. And after a cold and frosty start, temperatures ticking up to around average 7, 8, 9 Celsius. It is milder further north. We could reach 12 Celsius, say, in Aberdeenshire. But we'll keep the patchy rain going across the far northwest through the evening and overnight. Otherwise, it's dry. Clear skies in the south will allow a frost fairly quickly this evening to form, and then later in the night some dense patches of fog likely over the Midlands, South Wales and particularly parts of southern England. Patchy in nature, but nevertheless could be problematic first thing in the morning. Not so frosty further north, where we'll keep the breeze and we'll keep quite a lot of cloud. That cloud still providing some rain at times over the Highlands, but otherwise a dry day again to come tomorrow. Watch out for that fog in the morning across the south, patchy in nature, but could be quite dense. Should be out of the way by late morning, however, and then it's another generally fine and sunny day across the south a bit more cloud further north, and again, temperatures getting up to around average, maybe double digits in the southwest. Certainly again, though, mild in the far north, where we'll have, again, breezy and cloudy conditions with some patchy rain. That'll continue into Thursday evening, and again, we do the same with that frost forming quite quickly on Thursday evening, and if anything, some thicker fog patches likely for Friday morning. So the next few days, largely dry, some sunshine, some fog patches and cold mornings, especially so across the south. Bye for now.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m.